Now, just look at it this way, Rudy. You're making a contribution to science.
Okay. When can I have it back? After the fair. Okay.
Okay.
They made us laugh. They made us feel like part of the family. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the truth about the Cosby Show cast was nothing like the picture-perfect life we saw on screen. Some lived with secrets so heavy, they took them to the grave. Others faced betrayal, heartbreak, and endings far more tragic than anyone imagined. This is the story they never wanted told. When The Cosby Show first burst onto television screens in September of 1984, it didn't just entertain people. It redefined what a sitcom could be. This wasn't your average TV family. Cliff Huxtable wasn't a bumbling dad who could never get things right. He was a successful doctor with quick wit and boundless charm. Claire Huxtable wasn't the stereotypical stay-at-home mother. She was a confident, sharp-witted attorney who could hold her own in any argument. Together, they raised 5 kids in a Brooklyn brownstone that felt like a place we all knew, even if we'd never set foot in New York. The show shattered barriers for Black representation on television. Before The Cosby Show, Black families were rarely portrayed as upper-middle class, well-educated, and thriving. But suddenly, here they were, not as side characters or comic relief, but as the main story America tuned in to see. And people didn't just watch, they devoured it. By the mid-'80s, The Cosby Show was pulling in over 30 million viewers every week, dominating Thursday nights and staying in the top ratings for years. The Huxtables' living room became America's living room. Audiences felt like they grew up with Denise, Theo, Vanessa, and Rudy. They saw their own families in the arguments over homework, the awkward teenage crushes, the life lessons disguised as casual conversations in the kitchen. The warmth, the love, and the humor felt so real that it blurred the line between fiction and reality. But here's the thing about perfection. It almost never exists outside the screen. What the audience didn't see were the unspoken tensions, personal battles, and painful secrets the actors carried when the cameras weren't rolling. Behind the laughs were sleepless nights. Behind the heartwarming hugs were moments of deep loneliness. And in some cases, behind the smiles were lives unraveling in ways no one could have predicted. Some of the stars fought private wars with illness, depression, and broken relationships. Others battled the industry itself, fighting typecasting, racism, and the crushing pressure of fame. And for a few, their endings came far too soon, in ways that still shock fans decades later. The magic of The Cosby Show was that it made us believe in a perfect family. But the truth is, perfection was an illusion. What happened off-screen was often darker, messier, and more heartbreaking than any storyline the writers could dream up. And for one beloved actress, the warm, loving grandmother we thought we knew, the applause would soon fade into whispers of backstage conflicts, strained relationships, and a final chapter no one expected. If you ever watched The Cosby Show, you'll remember the soft smile and warm presence of Anna Huxtable, Cliff's wise and loving mother. She was the kind of grandmother everyone wished they had. Gentle yet firm, charming but never afraid to speak her mind. That role belonged to Clarice Taylor, a woman whose career had been decades in the making by the time she stepped onto the set at age 68. But Clarice's journey to that iconic armchair in the Huxtable living room wasn't a smooth climb. Born on September 20th, 1917, in Buckingham, Virginia, she grew up in a time when opportunities for women of color in entertainment were painfully rare. She didn't walk straight into television fame. She spent years working at the post office just to make ends meet while chasing small acting jobs on the side. It was persistence, not luck, that got her in front of the camera. When she landed the role of Anna Huxtable, it seemed like the perfect late-career triumph. Audiences adored her. The warmth in her voice, the authenticity in her advice, the way she carried herself like someone who had truly lived a full life. In 1986, she even earned an Emmy nomination for her performance. But behind that beloved on-screen persona was a woman whose life off set was far more complicated. Clarice was known for being a perfectionist. On stage and in rehearsal, she demanded nothing less than excellence, from herself and from everyone around her. That intensity sometimes spilled over into tension. There was one infamous incident where she publicly scolded a fellow actor so harshly during a rehearsal that she was banned from performing at a major New York theater. And even on The Cosby Show, where she seemed so at home, her relationships with the production team weren't always smooth. Some crew members thought her style was too old-fashioned, and rumors swirled that producers even considered recasting her after the first season. Off-camera, Clarice lived life on her own terms. She never married, choosing instead to adopt 2 sons. But family life didn't protect her from heartbreak. In her later years, legal disputes over her estate created deep divisions, leaving her feeling betrayed and isolated from people she loved. Friends said she struggled with insomnia and bouts of depression, a far cry from the radiant grandmother fans thought they knew. Clarice Taylor passed away on May 30, 2011, at the age of 93, after battling congestive heart failure. She left behind an estate worth roughly $3 million, the sum of decades of steady, dedicated work. On screen, she was the picture of kindness and stability. In reality, her life was marked by battles that few knew about until long after the cameras stopped rolling. But Clarice wasn't the only Huxtable elder carrying a quiet burden. Sitting just across from her on screen was a man whose dignified grandfatherly smile hid a lifelong secret he never felt safe enough to share. As Russell Huxtable, Cliff's father, Earl Heyman, brought a calm authority and old-world charm to the show. His character was the wise family patriarch, stern when necessary, but always full of love for his children and grandchildren. He played the role so convincingly that it felt effortless. But for Earl, the path to that comfortable sweater and armchair was paved with personal sacrifice and silent struggle. Born on October 11, 1926, in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and raised in Brooklyn, Heyman discovered acting early and pursued it with an intensity that would define his life. He wasn't just a sitcom actor. He was a Shakespearean powerhouse, performing in London and on Broadway in productions like Othello and Macbeth. Critics praised his talent, but Hollywood had a different view. For all his skill, he found himself boxed into roles that rarely matched his range, and the color of his skin was often an unspoken barrier to the opportunities he deserved. When he joined The Cosby Show in 1984 at age 58, it was a chance to reach a massive audience, but it also brought him into a very different kind of spotlight. Viewers saw him as the picture of stability, the embodiment of family tradition. What they didn't know was that Earl lived much of his life with a truth he felt he couldn't share. For more than 50 years, he shared his life with Ralph Konis, a Norwegian seaman he referred to in private letters as my passionate life partner. But in the public eye, he kept that part of himself hidden, fearing that being open about his relationship could end his career in an era when the entertainment industry and much of the world was not ready to accept it. This secrecy took a toll. Friends and colleagues noticed his tendency toward isolation, and over time, he withdrew almost entirely from interviews and public appearances outside of his work. He threw himself into the arts, earning additional acclaim for voice work, most famously as Panthro in the animated series Thundercats. In Norway, where he spent much of his time, he was awarded the Order of St. Olav for his contributions to theater. By the time he passed away on November 17, 2017, at the age of 91, Earl Heyman had lived a life rich with artistry, but shadowed by the cost of keeping his true self hidden. His estate, valued at around $5 million, included an extensive archive of scripts, letters, and memorabilia, the tangible pieces of a career that spanned more than half a century. Earl's quiet dignity made him unforgettable on screen, but behind that dignified smile was a man who carried an entire life's worth of love, heartbreak, and unspoken words. A contrast that would be mirrored in the journey of a young actress whose star burned bright and went out far too soon. When Michelle Thomas first appeared on The Cosby Show in 1988 as Justine Phillips, Theo Huxtable's sweet, idealistic girlfriend, she radiated a kind of warmth that felt completely natural. She was only 20 years old, but there was something about her presence that made her instantly memorable. For a whole generation of fans, she wasn't just Theo's girlfriend. She was the embodiment of young love, optimism, and kindness. Michelle's career seemed destined for more than just a supporting role on a hit sitcom. She transitioned seamlessly into another beloved series, Family Matters, where she played Myra Monkhouse, a role that brought her even more fans. But while the public saw her as the bubbly, beautiful girl next door, Hollywood was quietly putting her under a crushing amount of pressure. In an industry obsessed with physical perfection, Michelle was constantly told she had to maintain an unrealistic standard. She was already petite, but still heard comments from casting agents urging her to drop just a few more pounds. Friends recalled how, after one particularly harsh audition, she left in tears. Not because she didn't get the role, but because the feedback made her feel as though she'd never be enough. Her personal life mirrored the complexity of her career. Michelle and Malcolm Jamal Warner, who played Theo, shared a real-life romance that fans loved to speculate about. But off-screen, it wasn't all picture-perfect. Friends described the relationship as intense but volatile, with breakups, reconciliations, and moments of jealousy that left Michelle emotionally drained. Still, even after their romantic relationship ended, the two maintained a deep bond. In 1997, Michelle received news that would change her life forever. She had a rare form of abdominal cancer called desmoplastic small round cell tumor. True to her private nature, she told almost no one outside her closest circle. She didn't want her illness to define her, or for the public to see her as anything less than vibrant. Instead of following the most aggressive treatments, Michelle was persuaded by some friends and family to try natural remedies, a decision that, in hindsight, likely allowed the disease to progress faster. By October 1998, the cancer had spread, forcing her to leave her role on The Young and the Restless. Her final weeks were spent in the hospital, with her mother and Malcolm Jamal Warner by her side. On December 23, 1998, Michelle Thomas passed away at just 30 years old. The outpouring of grief from fans was immense. Many couldn't believe that the cheerful, healthy young woman they'd grown up watching was gone. She left behind an unfinished music project, multiple acting credits, and an enduring image of kindness that continues to resonate decades later. But if Michelle's life ended quietly, surrounded by love, the next story is a jarring contrast. The life of a young man whose death was sudden, violent, and rooted in a lie that he never had the chance to challenge. When Merlin Santana joined The Cosby Show as Stanley, Rudy Huxtable's charming teenage boyfriend, he quickly became one of the most talked-about young actors on TV. He had the kind of looks, charisma, and screen presence that made teenage fans swoon. By 15, he was a rising star. And in the early 90s, he was everywhere. Moesha, The Steve Harvey Show, guest spots on sitcoms and dramas. But the bright spotlight of young fame can be blinding. As Merlin moved into adulthood, he struggled to find roles that broke away from the pretty boy image he'd built as a teen. Hollywood, in that era, wasn't offering many complex, meaningful roles to young Black or Latino actors, and Merlin wasn't shy about speaking up about it. In interviews, he openly criticized the industry for its racial biases and lack of diverse opportunities, a stance that didn't endear him to certain producers. Doors that had once swung open now started to close. Frustrated, Merlin began drifting away from the carefully managed path of a child star. Friends and family noticed him spending more time with people who weren't looking out for his best interests. He started missing auditions, skipping meetings, and immersing himself in nightlife that could be both intoxicating and dangerous. Fame had come early, but the stability to navigate it had never really been there. Then came the night of November 9th, 2002, the night everything ended. Merlin was sitting in a parked car in Los Angeles with his friend, actor Brandon Adams, when a gunman approached from behind. A single bullet pierced the front seat and struck Merlin in the head. He died instantly at just 26 years old. The shooter was 19-year-old Damian Andre Gates. The motive? A lie. A 15-year-old girl had falsely claimed that Merlin had made unwanted advances toward her. Police later revealed that the accusation was completely fabricated, a story spun out of personal drama, not truth. But by the time the facts came out, it was too late. Merlin left behind a young daughter, Melinda, and a family devastated by the senselessness of his death. His funeral in the Bronx drew hundreds of mourners, including many from the entertainment world who still struggled to comprehend how quickly his promising life had been stolen. His net worth at the time was estimated around $1 million, a fraction of what it could have been had his career continued its upward trajectory. If Michelle Thomas's story is one of quiet bravery, Merlin Santana's is one of brutal injustice. A reminder that not all Hollywood tragedies are slow, and not all lives get the chance to fade gently into memory. And while these two stories are among the most emotional in the Cosby Show's history, even the legendary guest stars who stepped into the Huxtable home carried their own hidden wounds. Not all the faces who walked into the Huxtable household were there every week. Some appeared only briefly, but their real lives were just as layered and heartbreaking as those of the main cast. When Lena Horne appeared as herself in 1985, she brought a kind of effortless elegance that only a true legend could carry. She was the embodiment of class and grace, a living reminder of Hollywood's golden age. But her journey to that moment had been anything but easy. At 16, Lena began performing at the Cotton Club, dazzling audiences. But Hollywood's doors weren't fully open to her. She was often cast in small singing roles, never as the lead. And in the segregated America of the 1940s, studios would even cut her scenes entirely for screenings in certain states. She endured personal heartbreak as well. Her first marriage ended quickly, and the death of her young son from kidney disease was a loss she carried for the rest of her life. By the time she visited the Huxtables, Lena had overcome more than most could bear. Yet she made it look effortless. Then there was Sammy Davis Jr., who appeared on The Cosby Show as Ray Palomino. A Rat Pack legend, he lived his life in the spotlight. But behind the glamour was a catalog of struggles that would break most people. As a black man in mid-century America, he faced racism even at the height of his fame, performing for white audiences who wouldn't allow him to stay in the same hotels. A 1954 car accident cost him his left eye, and he often joked darkly about being a one-eyed black Jew in an industry built on image. His personal life was messy and public. From a marriage to a white actress that sparked outrage, to affairs, addictions, and crushing debt. By the end, Sammy owed millions to the IRS, and his final days were spent battling throat cancer, unable to speak or sing. And then, Dizzy Gillespie, the jazz giant with the bent trumpet and perpetual grin. His 1980s appearance on The Cosby Show was lighthearted, but the man behind the horn had lived through decades of physical pain and emotional turbulence. A car accident had left him blind in one eye. His marriage was marked by infidelity, and his life on the road was a whirlwind of highs and self-destructive lows. In his final years, pancreatic cancer slowly drained his strength. Even then, he continued performing, playing through the pain, until just weeks before his death in 1993. Each of these legends walked into the Huxtable home and lit up the screen. But once they stepped off the set, they returned to personal battles that fame and talent couldn't erase. And the same was true for many other familiar faces from the show. Actors who might not have stayed long on our screens, but whose real-life stories carried the weight of entire novels. Joe Williams was already a legend in the jazz world before he played Al Hanks, Claire's father, in just a few episodes. His warm baritone voice had filled concert halls around the world, but behind the stage lights was a man battling depression so severe he once underwent electroshock therapy. Fame faded, and by the later years of his career, Joe found himself singing in small lounges, a shadow of the star he had once been. He never married, had no children, and when he died in 1999, he left behind both a musical legacy and a quiet sadness that few ever saw. Roscoe Lee Brown's deep, velvety voice made his one appearance as Dr. Barnabas Foster unforgettable. He was brilliant, highly educated, and fiercely private. So private that rumors about his personal life swirled for decades without ever being confirmed. Hollywood often said he was too intellectual for leading roles, a thinly veiled excuse for the prejudice he faced. Roscoe chose dignity over compromise, focusing on meaningful stage work over chasing celebrity. He died in 2007 from stomach cancer, leaving behind an air of mystery that matched his guarded personality. Elaine Stritch brought her sharp wit and unapologetic personality to the role of Mrs. McGee. She was a Broadway force of nature, but offstage, she fought a decades-long battle with alcoholism. Her brash honesty often alienated colleagues, and her personal life was marked by loneliness after the death of her husband. Still, she performed into her late 80s, refusing to soften her edges for anyone. She died in 2014, leaving a legacy as one of theater's most uncompromising voices. Lou Myers, remembered for his role as Mr. Davis, was known in the industry for his volatile temper as much as for his acting. His life was a mix of artistic triumphs and personal setbacks, including failed relationships and struggles with alcohol. In his later years, health problems kept him off stage more often than he liked, and when he passed in 2013 from heart failure, he did so quietly, far from the spotlight he had once enjoyed. Moses Gunn appeared only once on The Cosby Show, but his career in theater and film had already earned him critical acclaim. His early life was marked by hardship, losing his mother young, becoming homeless at 12. And even after finding success, he carried the discipline and occasional volatility those experiences had forged. He died in 1993 from complications of asthma, leaving behind a family and a body of work that reflected both strength and sensitivity. Finally, Lynn Thigpen, known to many children of the 90s as the Chief from Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, brought her gentle authority to a single Cosby Show role. She faced constant industry bias, a private battle with chronic illness, and the heartbreak of a miscarriage she never publicly discussed. She died suddenly in 2003 from a brain hemorrhage at just 54 years old, shocking colleagues and fans alike. One by one, these faces from The Cosby Show stepped off the stage and into their own final acts. Some quiet, some violent, all marked by struggles that the audience never knew about. And together, their stories form a stark contrast to the warm, perfect world they helped create on screen. For 8 seasons, The Cosby Show invited us into the Huxtable home, a place where problems were solved in 30 minutes. Love conquered every conflict, and laughter always carried the day. It was a vision of family that felt safe, comforting, and timeless. But when the stage lights dimmed, the truth was rarely that simple. The faces we welcomed into our living rooms were human beings, navigating lives filled with the same uncertainties, pains, and heartbreaks we all face, only magnified by the relentless pressure of fame. Some carried secrets for decades, terrified of what the truth might cost them. Others fought battles with illness in silence, unwilling to let the world see them as vulnerable. And a few met ends so sudden and cruel that even now, decades later, the shock still lingers. The magic of The Cosby Show was that it gave us a family to root for, week after week. But its real legacy might be something deeper. A reminder that the smiles we see on screen are not the whole story, and that even our brightest stars can carry the heaviest shadows. As the years pass, the episodes remain, forever frozen in that golden light of the 1980s and 90s. But behind those perfect moments are lives that tell a very different tale. One of resilience, loss, ambition, and the relentless search for meaning beyond the applause. So now, the question lingers. When we look back at the Huxtables, do we remember the flawless family they played, or the flawed, fascinating people they truly were?